Mom stole my dad's $400,000 life insurance and I got nuclear revenge by exposing her to the entire family. Me, 38F, and my husband Jim, 40M, had been happily married for 12 years. We had two wonderful kids, Timmy, 10M, and Sarah, 8F. Life was going well until my narcissistic mother, 65F, started causing drama. My mother had always been difficult, putting her own desires above everyone else's needs. But after my dad passed away a few years ago, she became unbearable. She constantly criticized me, Jim, and the way we raised our children. She acted like she was the ultimate authority on parenting despite making a huge mess of raising me and my siblings. It all came to a head when my mother announced she was moving in with us after her house was damaged in a storm. We expressed concerns about the situation, but she bulldozed over our objections, acting like it was a foregone conclusion. On moving day, she arrived with more belongings than we expected, enough to take over the guest bedroom, living room, and part of the basement. She made no effort to respect our space or routines. Instead, she lounged around barking orders like she owned the place. My kids were constantly anxious, afraid of setting her off. Jim and I fought to enforce basic rules, but my mother undermined us at every turn, spoiling the kids rotten one minute and then lashing out at them the next over trivial things. After 2 miserable months of this, I finally decided enough was enough. I told my mother she needed to find another living situation, as her presence was becoming toxic for our family. She responded by having an epic meltdown, screeching about how ungrateful and terrible I was for kicking her out on the street. In the midst of her tirade, she finally revealed what I had long suspected: she had cleared out my dad's entire life insurance payout after his death instead of splitting it with me and my siblings like he had wanted. The money was supposed to go towards helping all of us kids get set up in life. But my mother selfishly blew through the whole $400,000 on vacations, luxury items, and who knows what else in just a couple of years. Meanwhile, we had scraped and saved to buy our first home while she lived it up. I was absolutely blindsided and furious about the life insurance money. My dad had worked hard his whole life at a factory job to provide for us, only for my mother to disrespect his final wishes so callously. When I confronted her about it, she had the audacity to claim, "Well, I deserve to spend it however I wanted after being stuck with your father for 40 years. As if his income and that insurance money wasn't meant for the whole family. She then turned it around and berated me for having the nerve to kick her out after she sacrificed for me my whole life. The lack of accountability, manipulation tactics, and sheer level of narcissism was staggering even for her. Jim, appalled by her behavior, immediately took my side and told her she had 30 days to get out of our house. If she didn't leave by then, we would pursue legal action. My mom turned into a raging banshee, shrieking insults and hurling objects at us. She threatened to turn the kids against us and badmouth us to other family until we let her stay. In the heat of the moment, I blurted out that if she didn't get out, I would go scorched earth and make sure she ended up penniless and alone by reporting the theft of my dad's life insurance money to the authorities. This shut my mother up temporarily, but I could see the gears turning in her head, trying to figure out a way to slither out of the consequences. She eventually hissed, "You wouldn't dare. That's your own flesh and blood you'd be sending to prison." Jim doubled down, making it clear we weren't bluffing. For once, my mom seemed to realize we were serious. She sulked off to her room, leaving a tense calm. That night, after putting the kids to bed, Jim and I had a long discussion. While turning my mother in would be immensely satisfying, we worried about the potential backlash and family drama it could cause. Plus, the legal processes might get complicated if it came down to one person's word against another's. After weighing the pros and cons, we decided on a course of action that would publicly shame my mother while protecting ourselves legally. First though, I needed hard evidence of the theft to make our case airtight. I stealthily went through the boxes my mom had brought, looking for any paperwork related to my dad's life insurance policy and payouts. Finally, I struck gold, a folder with all the details, including bank statements showing the $400,000 deposits into only her personal accounts. Armed with proof, I hatched a plan to expose her in the most brutal way possible, while watching her frantically try to salvage her tattered reputation as the truth came out. The next couple of weeks were tense, with my mother being sullen and uncooperative about moving out, but no longer overtly hostile. She likely hoped capitulating for now would make us reconsider turning her in. Meanwhile, Jim and I prepped our counterattack, scanning all the life insurance documents and uploading a detailed write-up to a private Google Drive folder, ready to blast out the link on social media and to our relatives. I also drafted an email to my aunt and uncles, letting them know about my mom's treachery and that I would share proof soon unless she made things right with all of us immediately. On day 28 of the 30-day period, with no change in my mother's attitude, I hit the button and posted the pre-written social media expose. I laid everything out in clinical detail, leaving no room for doubt. The proof was incontrovertible that she had selfishly robbed my father's own children of their rightful inheritance. Within minutes, my phone was flooded with messages from shocked friends and relatives seeing the posts. My aunt called, in tears after reading my email to her, saying they had long suspected my mother's lies but could never prove it. My mother must have seen the sudden activity, because she came barreling out of her room, face red with rage when she realized what I had done. She started screeching like a banshee, hurling insults and claiming I doctored all the evidence to turn everyone against her. I simply stayed stone-faced, letting her meltdown demonstrate to the world her true character. As the messages continued pouring in from outraged relatives and friends, my mother's final defense crumbled. The jig was up, everyone knew exactly the kind of person she really was now. In an attempt to save face, she tried lying that she had paid taxes on the insurance money and it was gone. But my aunt quickly shut that down, saying their dad's policy was totally tax-free. There was no way $400,000 should have disappeared in just 2 years unless she was living like a billionaire. The final nail in the coffin was when my uncle texted saying that if my mother didn't immediately start making restitution to all of us kids, he would be filing a police report for felony theft and exploiting the elderly, my late dad. This seemed to break her spirit. In that moment, my mother's facade crumpled. All the bravado, all the false indignation melted away into a sniveling, pathetic sight. She collapsed into a chair, crying and begging for mercy, suddenly worried about going to prison. I almost felt a pang of pity watching the display, but then remembered the years of torment she had inflicted. I had no sympathy left for her crocodile tears. This was the bed she made for herself. We hammered out a legal agreement with the help of my uncle's attorneys. My mother would have to sign over the remaining $175,000 for my dad's policy to be split between me and my siblings. She was also forced to refinance her house and cut us kids' cash payments from the equity. In total, she had to fork over a little over $300,000 to make restitution for the money she stole from us. She also had to pay my uncle's legal fees and officially sign a promissory note potentially allowing criminal charges if she didn't follow through. It was deeply satisfying to watch her be forced into a corner with no way out. For once, the narcissist had to accountable. In a last desperate gambit to avoid complete ruination, my mother briefly tried arguing in court that my dad's policy was meant as hers alone since she was his spouse. But the paperwork clearly stated it was meant to be split amongst all his children after her passing. The judge immediately threw out her case and threatened to sanction her for abuse of process if she didn't stop with the frivolous claims. Faced with potential perjury charges, she finally capitulated and agreed to all the restitution terms. It took several months for the money transactions to be fully processed, but in the end, my siblings and I each received payouts of over $75,000 after legal fees, the inheritance our father had always intended. While the financial restitution helped provide a sense of justice being served, it didn't fully heal the emotional scars. My siblings and I had to go through grief counseling to process the incredible betrayal by our own mother. My mother initially tried love-bombing me with apologies and pleading for another chance, but I remained firm in cutting her out of my life completely. I wanted her toxic influence forever removed from my children's lives. It took a long time, but my husband, kids and I slowly worked through the trauma and were able to move forward. The ordeal was a harsh lesson, but it made our family unit stronger and closer than ever before. Ultimately, I'm at peace with how things turned out. I'll never be able to forgive my mother for her unforgivable actions, but I don't lose sleep over it anymore. She's now alone, flat broke, and a social pariah, the archetypal narcissist's worst nightmare. My kids are thriving without her negative influence, and the monetary windfall helped ensure their college funds were topped up. More than anything, I'm proud of myself for finding the strength to excise such a toxic person from our lives. Sometimes you have to go nuclear on people to stop the cycle of abuse. While the path wasn't easy, I have zero regrets. I'd do it all again to protect my family. Break story 2. Me, 32F, and my husband, 34M, have been married for 5 years. We have a beautiful 3-year-old daughter named Emily. My husband, let's call him John, comes from a wealthy family. His parents, 60F, and 62M, are extremely well off and have always looked down on me because I come from a middle-class background. Despite their disapproval, John and I have built a happy life together. We both have stable careers, and we've worked hard to provide a comfortable life for our little family. That's why what happened next was such a shock. John's parents have always been obsessed with their family's wealth and status. They've made it clear that they expect John to follow in their footsteps and maintain the family's affluent lifestyle. They've never been supportive of our relationship, and they've always tried to undermine me, claiming that I'm not good enough for their son. Despite their constant criticism, we've tried to maintain a civil relationship with them for the sake of our daughter. We wanted Emily to have a relationship with her grandparents, even if they weren't always kind to me. It all started a few months ago when Emily came home from a weekend visit with John's parents and seemed a bit off. She was quieter than usual and seemed almost scared of something. When I asked her what was wrong, she reluctantly told me that her grandparents had taken her to a casino and left her alone in the car for hours while they gambled inside. I was absolutely livid. How could they be so irresponsible and put our child in such a dangerous situation? When John came home from work, I immediately told him what had happened. John was just as shocked and outraged as I was. He couldn't believe that his parents would do something so reckless with our daughter's safety. We decided to confront them about it immediately. When we brought it up, John's parents brushed it off like it was no big deal. They claimed that Emily was perfectly safe in the car and that they had checked on her regularly. They even tried to justify their actions by saying that they had won a substantial amount of money at the casino, and they wanted to celebrate. We were appalled by their lack of remorse and their attempt to justify their actions. John made it clear that what they did was completely unacceptable and that they had put our daughter in harm's way. His parents, as usual, dismissed our concerns and accused us of overreacting. The confrontation quickly escalated into a heated argument. John's parents insisted that they had done nothing wrong and that we were being overly dramatic. They even had the audacity to suggest that we were ungrateful for the money they had won at the casino. The argument continued to spiral out of control. John's parents became increasingly defensive and started lashing out at me, making snide comments about my background and implying that I was a bad influence on John and Emily. I couldn't believe the level of disrespect and entitlement they were displaying. They seemed to believe that their wealth and status gave them the right to do whatever they wanted, even if it put our child in danger. John tried to defuse the situation, but his parents were relentless. They accused us of being ungrateful and threatened to cut us off financially if we didn't apologize and drop the issue. At that point, I had had enough. I told them that we didn't need their money and that we would never allow them to put Emily in harm's way again. John backed me up, and we made it clear that they would not be allowed to see Emily until they acknowledged their mistake and promised to never do anything like that again. John's parents were outraged by our ultimatum. They accused us of trying to keep Emily away from them and threatened to take legal action if we didn't comply with their demands. The argument escalated to the point where John's father started shouting and hurling insults at me. He called me a gold digger and accused me of trying to turn John against his family. At that point, John had had enough and told his parents to leave our home immediately. After John's parents stormed out, we were left feeling shaken and overwhelmed. We couldn't believe the lengths they had gone to defend their actions and the level of disrespect they had shown us. Over the next few days, John's parents bombarded us with angry calls and messages, demanding that we apologize and allow them to see Emily. They even went so far as to threaten to take us to court for grandparents' rights. We tried to reason with them, but they were unwavering in their belief that they had done nothing wrong. They continued to hurl insults and accusations at us, claiming that we were depriving Emily of her rightful inheritance and trying to turn her against her family. The situation became so toxic that we decided to cut off all contact with John's parents for the time being. We changed our phone numbers and blocked them on all social media platforms to avoid their constant harassment. However, John's parents were not content to let the matter go. They hired a private investigator to follow us and gather information that they could potentially use against us in a custody battle. The investigator would show up at Emily's daycare, our workplaces, and even follow us on outings. It was an incredibly stressful and unsettling time, as we never knew when or where we might be watched. True to their threats, John's parents filed a lawsuit seeking grandparents' rights and visitation with Emily. They claimed that we were denying them access to their granddaughter out of spite and that they had a right to be a part of her life. We were forced to hire a costly lawyer to defend ourselves against their accusations. The legal battle dragged on for months, with John's parents using their wealth and resources to try to overwhelm us. In the end, the judge ruled in our favor, citing the evidence of John's parents' reckless behavior and their refusal to acknowledge their wrongdoing. The judge made it clear that they had put Emily's safety at risk and that their actions had been unacceptable. While we were relieved by the outcome, The legal battle had taken a significant emotional and financial toll on our family. We had spent thousands of dollars on legal fees, and the stress of the situation had strained our marriage and our mental health. In the aftermath of the legal battle, we found ourselves struggling to come to terms with the depths of John's parents' narcissism and entitlement. They had shown a complete disregard for our daughter's well-being and had unleashed a torrent of abuse and harassment upon us when we tried to hold them accountable. We were forced to confront the reality that John's parents were toxic individuals who were willing to go to extreme lengths to maintain their sense of control and superiority. It was a painful realization, but it ultimately brought us closer together as a family. While the experience with John's parents was undoubtedly one of the most challenging and traumatic events of our lives, it also taught us valuable lessons about standing up for ourselves and our family. We learned that wealth and status do not give anyone the right to disregard the safety and well-being of others, especially children. And we discovered the strength and resilience of our love for each other and for Emily. While we may never have a healthy relationship with John's parents, we have emerged from this ordeal with a renewed sense of what truly matters, our family's happiness and security. And for that, we are eternally grateful.